Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan, located in the U.S., is one of the 5 Great Lakes of North America, with the others being Lakes Huron, Superior, Erie, and Ontario. Lake Michigan is the 3rd largest by surface area and the 2nd largest by volume of all the Great Lakes. And while it may not be the biggest in the history books, if you take a look at a map, Lake Huron is technically connected to Lake Michigan, and in the context of hydrology, they form one body of water. When treated as a single entity, Lake Michigan-Huron, as scientists refer to it, is the biggest freshwater lake according to surface area in the entire world. Lake Michigan is a highly frequented tourist destination located in, you guessed it, the great state of Michigan. The lake has beautiful wide sugar sand beaches as well as giant sand dunes that cascade into sparkling blue fresh water. While hordes of people flock to the surrounding beach towns with hopes of sun tanning and swimming in the Great Lake, many are unaware of its dark history. The lake is well known for its shipping history, and it has been a critical resource for the U.S. during war times. However, mystery seems to surround this lake like a dense fog. Multiple myths exist, one being known as the Ghost Fleet of the Great Lakes. Shipwrecks, as we know, were not uncommon in this body of water. Due to the area's devastating weather patterns, any sea-bearing vessel willing to journey along its waters is at risk of being caught in Mother Nature's wrath. The oldest of the ghost ships is called Le Griffon, and it went missing in the year 1679. The boat was rumored to be cursed, and it's now said to be on an eternal collision course with other vessels in Michigan Harbor, but disappears before ever making contact. Also, the Bannockburn, a Canadian freighter, is another one of these ghost ships that was lost in 1902 on Lake Superior. Witnesses still report seeing the ship. No clear evidence or video has been presented to suggest that this is an actual occurrence. However, the hundreds of sightings makes you stop and wonder, could there really be ghost ships floating around in the Great Lakes? The Lake Michigan Triangle is another widely known phenomena surrounding the Great Lake. Just like the Bermuda Triangle, strange things happen here. The triangle stretches from Ludington to Benton Harbor, Michigan, all the way to Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Within this area of land and sea, a long list of disappearances have occurred since 1891. The year the legend all started, George Donner, the captain of the O.M. McFarland, retreated to his cabin one night after guiding his ship through the chilly waters and was never seen or heard from again. Since then, multiple ships, people, and airplanes have all vanished from within this mysterious triangle. One thing people seem to fixate on is the possibility of a ship or plane just seemingly evaporating into thin air. One of the better-known instances of one of these disappearances is Flight 2501 from Northwestern Airlines. The craft was on course to Seattle when they lost all radio contact after witnesses reported hearing sputtering engine sounds before it went dead. According to reports, the plane was right over Lake Michigan at the time of the incident. However, no wreckage was ever found, and no plane debris was ever discovered after a sonar search was conducted on the lake. In recent times, the public's attention has switched from the disappearances in or above Lake Michigan to the things being pulled out of it. Another mystery has presented itself, and many are left wondering how in the world so many World War II planes ended up at the bottom of this lake. About 200 military aircraft were lost during World War II in the Great Lakes. Although many of the aircraft have been recovered, the majority have not yet been found. Let's start by taking a look at some of these planes that have been pulled out of the water. Before we go on, have you ever heard the mystery surrounding Lake Michigan? Tell us in the comments below, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Douglas SBD-2P and SBD-5. The Douglas SBD Dauntless was manufactured by Douglas Aircraft between 1940 and 1944. These planes were created as a means of naval surveillance, as well as dive bombers used primarily in World War II. They had a tremendous impact on the war. The SBD, or Scout Bomber Douglas, was used by the U.S. Navy and was also flown by the United States Marine Corps from both aircraft carriers and land air bases. The SBD is mostly remembered as the bomber responsible for delivering the devastating blows to the Japanese carriers during the Battle of Midway in June 1942. The aircraft received the nickname Slow but Deadly for its amazing way of quietly and secretly creating havoc for enemies at the time. The plane was able to destroy targets from long range, had outstanding maneuverability, and held an impressive bomb load. One of the earlier models was the SBD-2P, which was only designed with the basic original configurations ordered from the Navy. They wanted this plane to be able to provide the U.S. military with photo reconnaissance. Out of the 87 SBD-2s that were built, only a total of 14 of them were created with this additional feature. An SBD-2P plane was pulled out of Lake Michigan in 2009. The most produced version of this aircraft was the SBD-5, which was created at the Douglas plant in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This variant of the plane had a 1,200 horsepower engine and an ammunition supply that was greatly increased from prior versions. One of these SBD-5 models was recovered from the bottom of Lake Michigan in 1994. It had been resting 250 feet below the lake's cold waters for over half a century. It still had its original paint and the pilot's seatbelt buckle inside the aircraft. The pilot, Lieutenant Charles L. Ford III, was trying to land on the USS Wolverine when it crashed. Ford lived through the accident with only 2 deep cuts to his forehead. The aircraft is now on display at the Military Aviation Museum at Virginia Beach, Virginia. Bell P-39 Airacobra. A fighter plane known as the Bell P-39 Airacobra was produced by Bell Aircraft for the U.S. Army Air Forces throughout World War II. When the U.S. entered combat, this plane was known to be one of the principal fighters in service at the time. Americans were not the only ones to use this aircraft, though. The Soviet Air Force, Royal Air Force, Free French, and the Italian co-belligerent Air Force all used P-39s during war times. The peculiar layout of the plane had the engine installed in the center fuselage, which was right behind the pilot. This aircraft was also the first of its kind to be fitted with a tricycle undercarriage, which is a type of landing gear that had one single-nose front wheel and 2 or more additional wheels on either side of the plane's center of gravity. Although the mid-engine placement was innovative, the P-39 design was left handicapped by the absence of a turbo supercharger. That meant that it was not well equipped to perform high-altitude work, and it was rejected for use over Western Europe by the RAF for that exact reason. The USSR, on the other hand, adopted this fighter plane despite its design flaws, since most of the air combat they participated in was at lower altitudes. The P-39, along with other derivatives like the P-63 King Cobra, were some of the most successful fixed-winged crafts ever to be created by Bell Aircraft. 2 of these planes were pulled out of Lake Huron, which is connected to Lake Michigan. In April 2014, a diver named David Lisinski was on a boat diving with his son when they spotted the submerged door of the wreckage of the P-39 Airacobra through the murky depths. The aircraft was discovered in 30 feet of water about 5 miles north of Port Huron in Lake Huron. This particular plane was determined to be used in training for the famous squadron of the Tuskegee Red Tails. Another P-39 Red Tail crash site was in the St. Clair River. On December 12, 1943, Flight Officer Nathaniel Rayberg died when he crashed near Algonac. State archaeologist Wayne Lusardi noted that there were 5 Tuskegee Airmen planes lost during training exercises, 4 in Lake Huron and 1 in the St. Clair River. Only 2 of the 5 have ever been found. Grumman FM-2 Wildcat. The Grumman F-4F Wildcat entered service in 1940 with the U.S. Navy as well as the British Navy, where it was known as the Martlet. The plane was a carrier-based fighter aircraft first used by the British in the North Atlantic, but it was quickly adopted by the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps since the Wildcat was the only effective fighter available to them at the beginning of the Second World War. The Wildcat was highly advanced for its time with speeds of 318 miles per hour. However, it was outperformed by the faster and more maneuverable Mitsubishi A6M0. And from the lessons learned from the superior craft, the F-6F Hellcat was developed as a later model to the F-4F Wildcat. This new model had better range and relied on superior high-speed performance and power in order to outperform the A6M0. However, the Wildcat was still produced throughout the remainder of the war and served on escort carriers where the much heavier Hellcat could not be used. Later versions of the Wildcat included the FM-1 and FM-2, which were optimized for small carrier operations. This new model had a much more powerful engine as well as a taller tail in order to cope with the increased torque. The FM-2s equipped with deadly bombs were used on the Japanese battleship Yamato, which in turn caused the Japanese fleet to withdraw from battle. In 2012, one of these aircrafts was recovered from Lake Michigan by A&T Recovery. At least 50 aircrafts in total have been pulled from Lake Michigan since the 1990s, and some of them have even been restored and put on display in museums for everyone to see. But still, the question remains, how did so many of these World War II planes end up in Lake Michigan? Well, let's get into it. Mystery solved. Although you may be connecting the Lake Michigan Triangle to a reason for this phenomena, there's a completely understandable explanation as to why so many planes are being pulled from beneath this great lake, and it has to do with military training. Ben Page from the Aviation Museum in Oshkosh has said that during the Second World War there was a lot of training happening right in the middle of Lake Michigan. The U.S. Navy realized after the attack on Pearl Harbor that they needed to train more naval aviators to be able to take off from a moving ship in the event of an emergency. Enemy submarines posed a giant threat of attack if they were to train on the Pacific or Atlantic Oceans, so they came up with a solution. There was already a large naval base located just north of Chicago, and it had space for their ships in the city itself. That Navy base is still known as Navy Pier today. In further detail, Page outlined that the aircrafts could operate out of Glenview, Illinois, and the ships could operate out of Chicago. The planes and ships would meet in the middle of the lake, and that's where they would go and train. Over 15,000 Marine and Navy pilots supposedly completed their training on Lake Michigan. Taras Lysenko, co-founder of A&T Recovery, detailed in a recent article for Mission History magazine that the U.S. Navy decided to train on Lake Michigan because it was a safe place for pilots to practice landing on aircraft carriers. They feared German U-boats along the East Coast and on the West Coast. The Japanese had highly advanced submarines that were capable of shooting torpedoes that could prove devastating to their objective. With the Second World War underway, there was no time to waste when it came to training the military in order to come out victorious. So the Navy bought 2 former excursion ships and then continued to convert them to makeshift flat tops, just like that of an aircraft carrier. These 2 vessels were called the USS Wolverine and the USS Stable. After these renovations were made, around 15,000 Navy pilots were qualified on the ships between 1942 and the end of World War II. Sadly, 130 of these pilots crashed their planes into the waters of Lake Michigan during training. But Lysenko and the A&T Recovery Company seem to have made it their mission to fish these 80-year-old planes out of the frigid waters of the lake in order to present them to the American public. Their recovery team has already pulled nearly 40 planes from the lake so far, and there are sure to be many more. So, anyone that's curious about these World War II aircrafts may just need to wait a few more years, and who knows what else they may find down there in the future. Do you think all the planes that went down in Lake Michigan during World War II will be recovered in the next 50 years? Let us know what you think down below, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time for some more amazing videos right here on American Eye.